My name is Detective Pierce. 30 years on the force, 20 of them chasing men who thought they could outrun their own guilt. But guilt has a way of catching the scent, doesn't it? It always finds you, even in the most sterile of places. Like the airport that morning. It started as a missing persons report, routine, unremarkable. A man named Daniel Hollis, mid-30s, software contractor, vanished after landing at Terminal 3 of the Bayfield International Airport. His wife said he texted her right after touchdown. Just landed. Picking up my bag. That was the last message. I arrived at the airport just after sunrise. The sky was washed out, pale and indifferent. Security lines moved in slow waves. People looked tired in that airport way, drained faces, blank eyes, each one carrying a private story in their luggage. The terminal smelled like coffee, detergent, and recirculated air. Screens flickered above me, listing flights to everywhere but where I wanted to be. The baggage claim area was nearly empty. A circular belt hummed, moving slowly, monotonously. A single suitcase circled again and again, black leather, worn handle, a tag flapping as it passed. I flashed my badge to the airport supervisor, a woman named Rena Morell. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her eyes followed the circling bag, too. "Detective Pierce," she said. "You're here about Mr. Hollis?" "That's right. His wife filed the report last night." She nodded, lips tightening. "Then you should see this." She led me past the belt to a small maintenance door. Inside was a cramped office lined with monitors showing feed from the baggage area. The footage from Flight 918, Hollis's flight, played on one of the screens. There he was, Hollis stepping into view, waiting near the belt, scrolling on his phone. Then, something peculiar, he looks up, distracted. His eyes follow the belt's motion. A black suitcase slides into frame. He studies the tag, frowns, and steps forward. Then static. Just a flicker. And when the feed clears, Hollis is gone. The bag keeps circling. I rewound the tape 3 times. Same thing. He's there one moment, gone the next. "No blind spots on the other cameras?" I asked. Rena shook her head. "That belt's under full coverage. We checked the angles. He just..." She stopped, searching for a better word. "Stopped being there." The black suitcase was still on the carousel when I went back out. It looked ordinary enough, except for one detail. The tag was partially torn, but I could still make out the printed name. J. Pierce. My own name. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself it was a coincidence. It had to be. Common name. Common mistake. I signaled an attendant and asked them to pull it off the belt. They hesitated, said they thought it was already claimed earlier. I told them to do it anyway. The bag was cold to the touch, heavier than it looked. No lock. No visible damage. Inside, the lining was immaculate, folded shirts, a jacket, shoes. All of it my size. And tucked neatly in the inner pocket, my own police ID badge. The same one clipped to my belt. I closed the bag carefully, trying not to let my hands shake. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above me. Announcements echoed across the terminal. "Flight 918 from Seattle has arrived at Gate 24. Please proceed to Baggage Claim Area C." Again and again. Like a loop that hadn't been turned off. But Flight 918 had landed 12 hours ago. I asked for the logs. Rena brought them, electronic manifests, timestamps, security reports. Hollis's name appeared on the arrival list. Then again 2 hours later. Then again 5 hours after that. Every time, the same note beside it. Bag not claimed. Something about the repetition started to unsettle me. Airports run on pattern and precision, every second accounted for, every movement tracked. But here, the system itself seemed confused. When I asked about the physical storage records, Rena hesitated. Some of the unclaimed luggage disappears. Sometimes overnight. Sometimes after we log it. The cameras don't catch it leaving. How long has that been happening? Couple of months, she said quietly. Always from the same carousel. By evening, I had the bag sealed and transferred to the evidence locker. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't belonged to anyone else. That it had been waiting for me. The longer I stayed in that terminal, the stranger it felt. The echo of footsteps that didn't match mine. Reflections in the polished floor that lagged a heartbeat behind. Faces that seemed familiar, too familiar, among the passengers. And somewhere in the distance, behind the hum of the conveyors and the mechanical announcements, I could swear I heard the faint click of another belt starting to move. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that dull mechanical hum, the sound of the carousel belt turning, turning. Like it never stopped. Like somewhere, in some forgotten corner of the terminal, it was still moving. At dawn, I went back. Bayfield International was quieter in the early hours, stripped of its crowds and noise. Without the passengers, it felt like a shell, all glass and steel and recycled air. Empty, but still breathing. Rena met me near the security checkpoint. She looked worse than the day before. We didn't open yet, she said. I know, I answered. I need another look at that footage. We went back to the small office by the baggage area. I sat down, rewound the recording again, frame by frame. Hollis standing near the belt. The black suitcase sliding past. Then static, a flicker that lasted less than a second. I paused it on the distortion, zoomed in. It wasn't random noise. In the blur, I could almost make out a shape, the faint outline of a person standing behind the camera feed. Who was manning this monitor at the time? I asked. Rena checked the log. No one. The system was running on automated overnight review. We don't record after midnight unless a flight's coming in. I pointed at the timestamp. This was 2:41 a.m. She frowned. Then it shouldn't even exist. There was something about that number that tugged at me, 241. I'd seen it before. In the tag records, in the manifest logs, even on my own evidence submission form. All processed at 2:41 a.m. Coincidence, sure. But I've been around long enough to know better than to trust coincidences. In the storage section of the terminal, the unclaimed baggage room, the air was colder. Rows of suitcases sat neatly stacked, each tagged with a barcode and date. Except I noticed several of the tags had been blacked out with marker. Those? I asked. Rena hesitated. Bags we can't trace. No passenger record, no flight number. We keep them for a while, then they just vanish. The system deletes the inventory automatically. Deletes it? Yeah. But nobody programmed it to do that. I walked along the shelves, scanning the luggage. Some were dusty, some looked freshly placed. And then, halfway down the row, I saw another one. Same model. Same scuffed leather. Same torn tag. It read D. Hollis. Was this here yesterday? Rena shook her head slowly. I don't think so. I opened it. Inside, shirts, a wallet, an old paperback, all neatly folded. And in the side pocket, a boarding pass. Flight 918. Seat 17A. Arrival time, 2:41 a.m. Something in the air shifted. The hum of the fluorescent lights grew louder. The conveyor belts in the distance started moving on their own, the faint squeal of rubber echoing down the corridor. Rena looked at me. "You hear that?" I nodded. "Let's check it out." We walked toward the main hall, but when we reached the baggage area, the belts were already still. Only the sound of the overhead speakers filled the space, soft, distorted. "Flight 918 from Seattle has arrived at Gate 24. Please proceed to Baggage Claim Area C." Again. And again. I climbed behind the desk, checking the console. The announcement wasn't playing from the airport's system. It was coming from a local file, manually queued. Rena stared at the screen. "Who did that?" I scrolled through the file history. Last modified, 2:41 a.m. By user, Pierce_J. For a moment, I just stood there, watching my own name flicker on the monitor. The cursor blinked beside it like it was waiting for me to type. "Someone's spoofing my credentials," I said, more to myself than to Rena. "Can that happen?" "Anything can happen if the system's compromised." But I didn't believe it. Not really. Before leaving, I went back to the evidence locker. The first suitcase, the one with my name, was still sealed. At least, it should have been. But the tape had been cut cleanly. Not torn. Not pried. Cut. Inside, everything was the same, except for one thing: the badge was gone. In its place was a folded piece of paper. I opened it slowly. One line, typed in block letters. Baggage claim, 2:41 a.m. That night, I parked in the terminal lot and waited. The airport after midnight felt like another world, the lights dimmer, the echoes longer. The automated announcements continued every half hour, even though no flights were due. At exactly 2:40, I heard it, the belt starting to move. I stood up, watching from the shadows. A single black suitcase slid out from the tunnel, smooth and silent, as if placed deliberately. No tags. No markings. And then, a few seconds later, the faint sound of footsteps behind me. The footsteps stopped when I turned. The corridor was empty. Only the sound of the moving belt filled the silence, that slow, circular hum that felt less like machinery and more like breathing. I waited another minute, maybe two, until the announcement broke through again. "Flight 918 from Seattle has arrived at Gate 24. Please proceed to Baggage Claim Area C." The words echoed differently at night. They felt heavier, as if they weren't meant for the passengers anymore. The suitcase sat alone on the moving belt. No tag. No logo. Just black leather, perfectly ordinary. Still, I hesitated before touching it. I told myself it was just another misplaced bag. But the longer I stared at it, the more it felt like it was watching me back. I stepped forward, grabbed the handle, and pulled it off the belt. It was cold, colder than the air around it. The zipper resisted for a second, like it didn't want to open. Then it slid smoothly. Inside I found a few items. A dress shirt folded. A pair of worn shoes. A half-empty notebook. And tucked beneath them, a small, sealed envelope. My name on the front. I took it out slowly. The paper felt damp, soft around the edges. Inside, a single photo, old, glossy, the kind you'd get from a cheap instant camera. It showed the baggage claim area. The same spot I was standing in. Same carousel. And in the photo, a man stood exactly where I was, head slightly tilted, hand on the black suitcase. His face was mine. I felt my pulse tighten. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in faint, smudged ink. "You were here at 2:41 a.m. I glanced at my watch. 2:41. The lights above me flickered once. The belt stopped moving. Silence. Then, faintly, a chime from the intercom system. The same message started again, but slower, distorted, like a record dragging at half speed. Flight 918 from Seattle. The voice cracked, warbled, then cut off. The screens on the wall went black for a moment before flashing white, displaying a single line. Luggage claim, 2:41 a.m. Again and again. I backed away from the carousel. Somewhere behind me, a rolling noise, like another belt starting up. I turned toward the sound, but there was nothing moving. Just a faint echo of it, looping, repeating. I went back to the security office. Rena wasn't there. The chair was pulled out, coffee still warm on the desk. On the monitor feed, every camera showed static, except one. The baggage claim view. I pressed play. It showed me walking into frame, alone. Approaching the carousel. Lifting the suitcase. Then the video stuttered, a flicker of distortion, like a reflection on water. And for a split second, I saw someone else standing just behind me. Same height. Same build. Same coat. But when I turned to look behind me in the real room, nothing. I rewound the footage again. This time, I paused on the distortion and brightened the frame. The reflection wasn't of me standing in the same position. It was of me walking away, heading toward the maintenance door behind the carousel. Except I hadn't gone there. The maintenance door was unmarked, half hidden behind a luggage chute. A small red sign read "Authorized personnel only." I hesitated. Then I pushed it open. The air inside was colder, the hum of machinery louder. Narrow corridors stretched into the dark, lined with metal panels and flickering bulbs. The smell of oil and dust. I followed the faint echo of the conveyors below, my flashlight cutting through the shadows. Every few steps, I passed a storage area, small, fenced sections full of old, unclaimed bags. Most were covered in dust. But a few looked new. Too new. And on one of them, I saw my own name again, printed cleanly on a fresh tag. Pierce, J. Flight 918. That's when I heard it again, the belt starting somewhere in the distance. A mechanical whir, steady and deliberate. I turned the corner and found a small conveyor, older than the rest, leading to a steel hatch. The lights above it flickered weakly. On the belt, a single suitcase slid slowly toward the hatch, black leather, scuffed handle. And this time, when I crouched closer, I saw something written across the surface in faint, chalky letters. Returned. I reached out, and the belt stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was almost physical, pressing against my chest. I opened the suitcase. Empty. Except for the same photo I'd already found, but now older, more faded, like it had been printed years ago. And behind the image, faintly visible through the worn paper, I could make out another face. Not mine. Not Hollis's. Someone else. Someone standing behind both of us. By the time I got back to the surface level, the terminal was dead quiet. No passengers. No staff. Just the hollow hum of ventilation, the faint metallic echo of faraway conveyors, and the kind of silence that feels too deliberate. I called Rena. No answer. I walked past the information desks, past the glass doors leading to the runways. Rain streaked across the windows outside, reflecting 1,000 fragments of cold light. In each one, I caught a sliver of my own face, pale, tired, slightly delayed, like the reflection wasn't keeping up. I went to the main control office. It was locked. When I forced the door, the smell of stale coffee and burnt wiring hit me. The monitors were still on, screens glowing with static and half-broken feeds. I sat down and pulled up the log system. Passenger data. Flight records. Security credentials. For a while, It looked like ordinary bureaucracy, columns of names, timestamps, check-ins, luggage tags. But then I noticed a pattern. Every flight had a return entry. Not just arrivals. Returns. Each timestamp 2:41 a.m. And next to some of those names, a note. In small gray letters, barely visible. Status, return to claim. I scrolled until I found Hollis. Then another line appeared beneath his name, updated just hours ago. Pierce J. returned. I stared at the word until the screen seemed to pulse with it. Returned. Returned where? Returned from where? I checked the server time. It was still before dawn. But the timestamp on that entry was from 20 minutes in the future. A low mechanical sound made me turn. One of the baggage belts behind the glass partition had started up again. No operator. No signal. I watched it through the window, the same belt as before, slowly turning in the dim light. And then, from the chute, a suitcase slid out. Black leather. Scuffed handle. The tag this time was blank. But there was a small note taped to the side. I went down to the floor. The belt kept turning, smooth, endless, mechanical. The note was written in the same typeface as the airport's internal print labels, like something the system itself had produced. It read, "Property of debt, J. Pierce, do not remove." I looked around the room. Cameras mounted high above. Red indicator lights blinking in unison. Every one of them aimed at the belt. I opened the suitcase. Inside, nothing but a single cassette tape. No markings. No label. The last time I'd seen one of those was years ago, back when evidence storage still used analog recordings. I pocketed it and went back upstairs. The airport's archive room was just off the security wing, a narrow hallway with rows of digital servers humming quietly. At the end, a single analog station. Old recorder. Dusty. Someone had even labeled it Legacy Storage. I loaded the tape. The reels began to spin, slow and uneven. At first, just static. Then a voice. Low. Male. Flat. Baggage claim, 2:41 a.m. I leaned closer. The voice repeated the phrase again, quieter, more distorted. Then breathing. Long, tired breaths. And faintly beneath it, footsteps on tile. I turned up the volume. The sound of a zipper sliding open. And then a voice that made my chest tighten. "Detective Pierce, please confirm retrieval." It was my voice. The tape stopped. The reel clicked softly. I just sat there for a long moment, staring at the recorder. I hadn't spoken those words. Not in any context that made sense. But when I ejected the tape, there was a small handwritten label on the underside I hadn't noticed before. It read, "Evidence, retrieval complete." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. When I answered, only silence at first. Then, faintly, "Detective Pierce, Baggage Claim Area C. You've left something behind." The line cut. The terminal was darker now, lights dimmed automatically for night mode, but the emergency panels along the ceiling still glowed faint blue. The sound of rain outside had stopped. Even the airport's automated announcements had fallen silent. As I walked back toward baggage claim, I noticed small details that hadn't been there before: signs slightly tilted, scuff marks on the floor shaped like footsteps, wet, leading toward the same carousel. When I reached it, I stopped. A new suitcase was on the belt. Larger than before. No tags this time. But as it turned slowly past me, I saw something that froze me in place. The side of the suitcase had been partially unzipped. Inside, pressed against the fabric, was a human hand. The hand didn't move. It was pale, waxy, almost artificial in the fluorescent light. I stood there for what felt like minutes, just listening to the slow mechanical turn of the conveyor. Each rotation brought it closer. I reached for it. My fingers brushed the cold vinyl surface of the suitcase, then stopped. The texture beneath the zipper wasn't skin. It was something harder. Something flat. I pulled the zipper open all the way. Inside wasn't a body. It was a stack of files. Neatly arranged, sealed in plastic sleeves. Each one with a name, a date, and a number stamped in red, 2:41 a.m. On top of the pile, my own personnel file. Photo, ID, case summaries. Everything up to my last recorded assignment. The Luggage Claim Incident. Active investigation. Underneath that, a second folder. Same name. Same ID. But marked. Closed, returned. For a moment, the room felt like it was tilting. Not spinning, just shifting slightly, as though the floor had forgotten what level meant. The lights above flickered. When they stabilized, the carousel was empty again. The files were gone. The suitcase too. Only the faint hum of the belt remained. I looked down at the tiled floor and saw something dark spreading beneath the machinery. Not oil, not water. It was too still. Too black. And it reflected the ceiling lights in small, distorted ripples, like it had depth. I followed the reflection to the wall, where a small service hatch stood slightly ajar. It led down into a maintenance corridor, one of those forgotten arteries of the building that only engineers ever saw. The air there smelled faintly of metal and ozone. As I moved deeper, the sound of the conveyor faded behind me, replaced by something softer. Whispers. Not voices exactly, more like breath passing through narrow vents. The corridor sloped downward until it opened into a long, narrow chamber. Fluorescent bulbs flickered overhead, half of them dead. And at the end of the chamber, a single metal door. Above it, a sign. Return property. Authorized personnel only. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a slow hydraulic hiss, like an airlock. Cold air poured out, and a faint sound, rhythmic and wet. Rows of baggage carts filled the room. Each one carried a single suitcase, identical black leather, tagged with airport barcodes. But the names printed on the tags weren't random. I recognized every one of them. Victims from unsolved cases. People reported missing at terminals, stations, waiting areas. Names I'd seen before on incident reports that never reached the media. And at the far end of the row, a single untagged suitcase. Left open. Empty. I knew instinctively it was mine. Something moved behind me, a soft metallic rattle, like the conveyor belt starting again. Only there were no belts here. The sound came from above. I looked up. Rows of cameras lined the ceiling, all pointing down, red lights blinking in unison. For a moment, I thought I saw my own reflection staring back from the convex glass domes. But each one was slightly off, my face turned at the wrong angle, eyes a fraction too wide. A voice crackled from the room's intercom system. Static first, then clear speech. Detective Pierce, please confirm receipt of returned property. I didn't answer. Detective Pierce, your investigation is complete. Please return to claim. The voice was calm. Procedural. Indifferent. I turned toward the exit, but the door I'd entered through was gone. Just smooth metal where it had been. I backed away slowly until my heel hit something. Another suitcase. Smaller this time. It wasn't there before. A tag hung from its handle, freshly printed. Still warm. Name, Pierce J. Status, returned to claim. Time, 2:41 a.m. I crouched and unzipped it, half expecting another set of files. But inside was a mirror. A perfect, rectangular mirror, its edges trimmed with security tape. When I looked into it, the reflection didn't move with me. It stayed perfectly still. Then it smiled. The intercom clicked again. "Thank you for your cooperation, Detective. Your belongings have been processed." The lights above began to dim. One by one, the camera indicators went dark. The room grew silent. No hum of machines, no distant conveyors, no ventilation. Just stillness. A final, suffocating quiet. I took a step back from the mirror. In the reflection, I didn't. It stood there, hands folded, watching me as I turned away. Then, with a faint metallic click, the suitcase lid closed on its own. When the lights came back on, the room was empty. Just rows of sealed luggage, and the endless drone of air conditioning. Somewhere beyond the terminal walls, the first plane of the morning was taking off. I could hear it faintly, like thunder rolling through the structure. But here in this room, time didn't seem to pass. There was only return.